Imagine this, an actor known for being super calm and powerful, someone with real integrity, suddenly comes face to face with a TV host who just won't stick to the plan. Tonight, we're talking about that wild moment on late-night TV when Denzel Washington's interview on The Graham Norton Show went from chill to totally tense in minutes. Before we get into all the juicy details, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what you think really set Denzel off. Seriously, you'll want to hear how this all played out. The famous red chair was ready, the crowd was buzzing with excitement, and Graham Norton was in his element. They'd already had a fun cooking segment with a celebrity chef and some good laughs with a beloved actress. It was classic Graham, light, funny, and a little bit cheeky. Then, Denzel Washington walked onto the stage, and the audience went wild. He looked cool, calm, and radiated his usual quiet power. He sat down on the red sofa with that slow, knowing Denzel smile we've all seen a million times. Graham, being the great host he is, started with a friendly welcome. "Denzel man, it's an honor having you here tonight. How's life treating you?" It was an easy question to get things rolling. Denzel's answer was smooth and calm. He talked about his recent work mentoring young people, his passion for telling meaningful stories, and how he tries to stay grounded in an industry that pulls you in every direction. The audience was loving it, and for a few minutes, everything was going just like a normal talk show. But if you know Graham Norton, you know he doesn't stay on the surface for long. His charm is disarming, and that's how he gets to the real stuff. "You know, Denzel," Graham said with a twinkle in his eye, "I have to bring up something people have been really curious about lately. That whole thing about stepping away from big Hollywood movies and doing more personal projects. That must have sparked some conversations in your circle, right?" Denzel's body language changed subtly but noticeably. His smile tightened, and he straightened up a bit. "Well, Graham," he began, still calm but firm, "that was a decision I made with the people closest to me, and it's one I stand by. I'm doing the work I feel called to do. That's what matters." It was a perfectly polite and diplomatic answer, but Graham wasn't going to let it go. Of course," Graham said, still friendly. "But surely there must have been some, shall we say, interesting discussions? You don't just wake up one morning and decide to walk away from 9-figure movies without someone raising an eyebrow." The audience chuckled. This was the moment they were waiting for, when the smooth, polished exterior might just crack. Denzel gave a short laugh, but if you were paying attention, you could feel the tension building. "You know, Graham," he said slowly, his voice dropping slightly, "some conversations are meant to stay behind closed doors. That's something I think most grown folks can understand." It was a polite but clear warning. However, Graham Norton didn't become a beloved TV host by backing down at the first sign of tension. "Absolutely," he nodded. "Privacy matters. Totally agree. Although, I've got to say, for a man who values his privacy, you do seem to show up in the headlines pretty often." The crowd laughed again, but this time it was a different kind of laughter. Uneasy, curious, on edge. Denzel's jaw clenched slightly. "That's not lost on me," he said, his tone flat and serious now. "The media has a way of taking something personal, something sacred, and turning it into entertainment. That's just the game. Doesn't mean I have to play it." The atmosphere shifted. Graham felt it too, but he still pushed a little. "Oh, sure," he said lightly. "But I guess when you go on national television to talk about those personal things, you do sort of invite the discussion, don't you?" Those words hit the room like a bomb. Everything went quiet. Denzel didn't hesitate. "There's a difference," he said, his eyes locked on Graham, "between telling your truth and letting other people sell your pain for ratings." He continued, "Some of us have had to live with that kind of spotlight our whole lives. And after a while, you decide what you're going to stand for." His voice had risen, not loud, but firm and intentional. There was no acting in it. Graham leaned forward now. The mood had completely changed, and he knew this wasn't just another celebrity interview. "I hear you," he said quietly. For a moment, there was a sense of mutual respect in the air, but the tension was still thick. I really do. But you have to admit, Graham said, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly, there's a certain irony in demanding privacy while actively engaging the media. I mean, interviews, documentaries, best-selling memoirs. You can't really have it both ways, can you? Those words were like a spark to dry wood. Denzel's jaw locked for a split second, and for the first time that evening, his calm facade slipped. You know what, Graham? The voice wasn't loud, but there was fire in it. There's a real misunderstanding here. See, when you've spent decades having people write your story for you, spinning it, twisting it, selling it to the highest bidder, trying to take control of your own narrative isn't hypocrisy. It's survival. You could have heard a pin drop. The laughter from earlier was gone, replaced by a buzzing, electric tension. To Graham's credit, he didn't flinch. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the desk, his voice still measured. I think I understand perfectly well, he said. But what I'm trying to get at is this. Why expect the public to sympathize with your need for privacy when you keep choosing the most public platforms to air your grievances? And that's when Denzel stood up. The scrape of his chair echoed like thunder across the studio floor. You know what? He said, his voice trembling, not with fear, but with controlled fury. I came here thinking this would be a real conversation, but it looks like you're just here to win points, not hear truth. Graham stayed seated, but his eyes were sharp and unwavering. Denzel, he said, I'm simply asking the questions the audience wants answered. If those questions are uncomfortable, maybe the discomfort lies somewhere deeper than the question itself. There was no punchline in his tone anymore. This wasn't entertainment now. It was something else. Denzel stood tall and commanding, his chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. The camera lights still burned, and the studio was frozen. The other guests were silent, still, watching the moment unfold like deer caught in headlights. Sit down, Denzel, Graham said quietly. His voice was soft but firm, half request, half command. For a second, it seemed like Denzel might, but then he stepped forward. Just one step, and when he spoke again, his voice was low, a whisper laced with gravity. You want to know the real problem, Graham? He didn't wait for a reply. The real problem is that people like you, media people, somehow believe you have a right to dissect every part of my life, my marriage, my children, my past. Like I'm not a human being, but some character in your late-night drama. Graham raised his eyebrows, keeping his tone neutral. People like me, he said. You mean television presenters or something else? It was a subtle challenge, full of unspoken meaning, and everyone felt it. Denzel's voice rose. I mean, people who profit off other people's pain, he snapped. You sit there in that chair, comfortable, clever, making light of things that damn near broke real people. And you call it harmless, but it's only harmless when you're not the one bleeding. The audience was holding its breath now. This was raw, real, the kind of unscripted moment you rarely see. Graham leaned back, fingers steepled, his tone unchanged but not unfeeling. I've been doing this a long time, he said, and I've always tried to treat my guests with respect. But part of respect is not treating people like they're made of glass. You can't claim strength, then fall apart when the questions get real. Denzel blinked once. Real questions. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from disbelief. You're standing there practically calling me a hypocrite on national television. And you think that's respect? Now Graham's smile sharpened. Gone was the playful charm, replaced by steel. I'm not accusing you of anything, Denzel, he said. I'm pointing out contradictions. If those feel uncomfortable, maybe ask why they exist instead of blaming the one holding up the mirror. The words hit Denzel like a punch to the gut. His eyes narrowed, and his hands curled at his sides. You know what, Graham, he said, stepping in just a little closer. All this talk about being the respectful host, the safe space guy, but the second you think you found a crack, you go for the throat like the rest of them. Graham rose now, matching Denzel in height and presence. And suddenly, the dynamic in the room flipped. "I'm not going for anyone's throat," he said, his voice low but unshakable. "But I am going for the truth, and I don't apologize for that. I'm doing my job, which is to have honest, engaging conversations with people in the public eye. If that level of scrutiny is too much, maybe you should rethink the spotlight you keep stepping into." And there it was. Denzel pointed directly at him. The move wasn't dramatic. It was sharp, controlled, accusatory. "There it is," he said. The smile fades and out comes the real deal, the calculated media man who will throw anybody under the bus for ratings and call it journalism. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Denzel wasn't playing for the crowd anymore. This was real. "Oh, you want to talk about calculated?" Graham said, leaning forward now, his voice just a shade colder. "Coming on this show, taking the spotlight, the platform, the attention, and then turning around to accuse me of manipulation. You can't ride the wave when it suits you and cry foul when it turns." "I'm not crying foul," Denzel snapped back. "I'm protecting my family from the same kind of treatment that tore my mother apart." Silence. The mention of his mother sent a jolt through the studio. Even the crew froze. You could see it hit Graham. His face shifted slightly, less smug, more serious, but his voice stayed firm. "Don't bring your mother into this, Denzel. That's not fair. And deep down, you know it." He paused. "Your mother was a powerful woman. Resilient. She faced a level of media cruelty that no one should endure. But your situation, it's not the same. And using her memory to shield yourself from accountability? That's beneath you." Denzel's face changed, went white with rage. "How dare you?" he said, barely louder than a whisper. "You don't speak on her. You didn't know her. You didn't bury her. So, don't you dare use her name to make your point." Graham didn't flinch. "And you don't get to use her legacy as a free pass," he said, his voice rising now. "She went through hell. Real persecution, real consequences. But this is a talk show. Questions aren't bullets, and pretending otherwise disrespects what she actually endured." The air was crackling now. Even the lights seemed hotter. The other guests had become invisible. The audience was locked in place, not even daring to cough. Denzel's fists were clenched at his sides, his shoulders tight with fury. "You know what, Graham?" he said, his voice now ice cold. "Behind all that charm, all that British wit, you're just another vulture picking at people's scars and calling it entertainment." Graham's smile returned, but now it was sharp, surgical. "And this," he said, motioning around the set, "this moment tells the world everything they need to know about you." He leaned in, his voice low but clear. "You talk about wanting to own your story, but what you really want is to own everyone else's, too. You want to say what you want, when you want, but the second someone questions it, you explode. That's not integrity, Denzel. That's control." "That's not true," Denzel said. But the steel in his voice had dulled. There was doubt creeping in now, or maybe just exhaustion. "Isn't it?" Graham pressed, eyes locked on him. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're more than willing to talk about your personal life, as long as no one asks inconvenient questions. But the moment things get uncomfortable, you shout, you walk, you make threats." Denzel's face flushed deeper, the mask of calm cracking. "I'm not making threats," he shouted, the sound bouncing off the studio walls. "I'm standing up for my name, my family, for basic respect. Something you clearly think only applies when the cameras are off." "Respect," Graham said, the word slow and deliberate. "What consequences are you hinting at, Denzel? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're saying anyone who questions you should be punished. That doesn't sound like respect." That sounds like control. And last I checked, freedom doesn't work like that. The silence that followed was heavy. Denzel stood there, breathing hard, his hands shaking with barely contained fury. But Graham leaned back in his chair, composed as ever. "You don't have to stay," he said almost casually. "You don't have to answer a thing. But if you storm off this stage, if you leave this conversation unfinished, then you prove everything I've just said. That you can dish it out, but you can't take it. That you demand respect, but refuse to give it." The moment stretched. Long, uncomfortable, raw. Denzel stood in the center of the frame like a coiled spring. The crowd wasn't even blinking now. It wasn't just an interview. It was something else, something real. Then finally, Denzel spoke. His voice was low, calm, but lethal. "You think you're clever, don't you, Graham? You think you've cornered me, that you've given me a false choice. Sit here and take your shots, or leave and prove your point." He stepped closer to the desk, just inches away now. "But you made one crucial mistake." Graham's brow lifted slightly, but his face stayed calm. "And what mistake is that, Denzel?" Denzel's voice came back low but steady, gaining strength with every word. "You assume I care," he said. "You assume your opinion or your audience's opinion means anything to me." He stepped forward. "I've lived my whole life under a microscope, judged, picked apart, analyzed by people who have never walked a single step in my shoes. And I've learned people like you, your opinion's worth exactly zero to me." That landed hard. Graham leaned in, intrigued despite himself. "People like me," he repeated. "You keep saying that. What exactly do you mean, Denzel?" Denzel didn't hesitate. "I mean people who've never had to sacrifice anything real," he said. "People who've never had to choose between protecting their family and protecting their peace. People who sit in judgment nice and safe behind a desk, never paying the price for the words they throw around." Graham's smile turned razor-sharp. "That's rich," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Coming from a man who spent his life with everything, prestige, wealth, access, and now you want to talk about sacrifice." He leaned forward again, the blade of his tone cold and deliberate. "You've never had to worry about making rent, feeding your kids, holding down 3 jobs while grieving a loss no one even knows about. You don't get to play the victim of the media and the benefactor of global attention." Denzel let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh. "You think growing up with cameras in your face, every mistake turned into a headline is privilege? You think losing my mother to the pressure of that system is something I'm lucky to have experienced?" "I think," Graham said carefully, "that access to elite education, world-class healthcare, global platforms, and resources most people only dream of is yes, privilege. And I think using that platform to tell the world how hard your life is while ordinary people face real hardship is at best tone-deaf." Denzel's jaw tensed, his voice dropped. "You know what, Graham? You're exactly what's wrong with the media today. You pretend to stand with the people, but you're just another guard dog for the system, attacking anyone who dares to question it because their truth makes you uncomfortable." Graham didn't flinch. "Oh, the system," he said mockingly now. "You mean the same system that gave you the life you live? The career, the spotlight, the voice you now use to criticize it?" "No," Denzel said sharply, his voice cracking slightly. "I mean the system that killed my mother. The one that turns people into profit, families into headlines. And yes, you're a part of it, whether you admit it or not." Graham stood now, matching Denzel's height, tone, and tension. "Your mother's death was a tragedy," he said. "A tragedy no one should ever have to endure. But using that tragedy to justify everything you do, to deflect criticism, to sidestep responsibility, that's not honoring her legacy. That's using it." The words hit Denzel like a punch. His whole body tensed. And for a moment, it looked like he might lash out, not physically, but with something deeper. You don't get to tell me how to honor my mother, he said, his eyes blazing. You didn't love her. You didn't lose her. You didn't see what the media did to her. You don't know anything about that pain, and you don't get to come on my show, Graham shot back, and expect a free pass. Everybody's got pain, Denzel, everyone's lost something, but not everyone gets to use that loss as a shield from accountability while building a media empire off their trauma. Denzel's voice rose. My agenda is protecting my family, he said, his voice thundering now. My agenda is trying to keep them from suffering the same fate. My agenda is using my voice to fight for people who don't have one. What exactly is wrong with that? Nothing, Graham said, his voice calm again but firm. There's nothing wrong with helping people, but there is something wrong with hypocrisy. He looked straight at Denzel. You can't spend years tearing down your past, selling your story for profit, doing exposes, books, interviews, and then get upset when someone asks, why? Denzel stepped forward again. I didn't ask for any of this, he growled. I didn't ask to be born into a life I didn't choose. I didn't ask for the headlines, the chaos, the scrutiny. All I ever wanted was peace, a normal life for my wife and kids. But people like you won't allow that. Graham's tone softened just slightly. You may not have asked for it, Denzel, he said. But you have it, and with that comes responsibility. You can't pick and choose when you're a public figure and when you're a private citizen, Graham said, his voice cutting like glass. You can't profit off the spotlight, then reject the weight that comes with it. Denzel's response came cold, icy, final. Watch me. He didn't raise his voice, but every word struck like a hammer. Watch me walk away from all of it. Watch me reject every label, every demand, every obligation people like you try to hang around my neck. Watch me choose my family over your expectations, your judgments, your so-called responsibilities. Graham didn't blink. Then why are you here, Denzel? He asked quietly. If you've rejected it all, if you want no part of this life, then what are you doing on my sofa, speaking to my audience, using the very machine you claim to hate? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Denzel opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence was brutal. Every second stretched tighter until finally, you want to know why I'm here, he said, his voice tight, shaking with anger and something deeper. Because I made the mistake of thinking maybe there was one person in this industry who would treat me like a human being. Not a headline, not a brand, not a scandal. He turned slightly, glaring at Graham. But I was wrong. You're all the same. Vultures circling pain for profit. Graham's expression sharpened, his voice colder than ever. And you're no different, he said. Entitled, shielded, addicted to attention, allergic to responsibility. You want the power, the influence, but none of the pushback. You want to preach, but never be questioned. Denzel's eyes flashed, his fist clenched. That's it, he said, his voice booming. I'm done. I'm done with this nonsense. I'm done with you. I'm done with all of it. He turned toward the exit, his steps fast, precise, furious. Walking away again, Denzel? Graham called after him. Just like you walked away from the industry when it got inconvenient. Just like you walked away from accountability. Just like you run from every conversation you don't control. Denzel turned back, rage painted across his face. I'm not running, he growled. I'm removing myself from a toxic space. There's a difference. Is there? Graham asked, his voice pure mockery now. Because from this angle, it looks a lot like running. Security! Denzel barked, his fury now at a full boil. I want this man out of this building. Blacklisted, barred. I don't care what it takes. He's done. Graham burst into laughter. Not nervous, not fake, just brutally amused. There it is, he said to the studio. There's the real Denzel Washington, not the noble storyteller, not the grounded truth-teller, but the man who uses his influence to silence anyone who dares question him. Denzel's voice rose into a roar. Get him out now. But Graham was far from finished. This right here is what happens when privilege meets pushback. When someone who's been praised, protected, and propped up for decades finally hears the word no, and he can't handle it. Not from me. Not from anyone. The studio had erupted into chaos. Security rushed in but stood frozen, unsure. Denzel was shouting orders. The audience was on their feet. Some stunned, some cheering, some booing. The other guests were long gone, and yet Graham remained seated, still composed, watching it unfold like a man who'd seen this moment coming from the first question. Finally, it was Denzel who left, storming off the set, fury in every step. His parting words cut through the noise like a blade. You haven't heard the last of this, Graham. You haven't heard the last of this. The camera stayed rolling. Graham watched him go, then turned back to the audience, a calm smile forming. Well, he said, I'd say that went better than expected. He leaned forward slightly. And that, folks, is how a man lost his composure, his dignity, and his welcome on one of the most respected stages in television. He paused, letting the silence settle. What do you think sent Denzel over the edge? Was it the questions, the accountability, or was it something deeper? Let me know in the comments.